So before we finish the episode, we got to talk some Runnin Utes. We talked about the heavy overturn. Obviously, that is college basketball nowadays with the portal being wide open, lots of players going in, finding spots. Um, First off, obviously the big guy down low, Branden Carlson, testing the NBA draft. I think a lot of people are expecting him to come back, but I think he's looking for some feedback, especially from guys that are obviously in charge of the draft process, because I think Carlson does have the potential to be an NBA guy. I think he's proven that, to be a 7-foot guy that can shoot from the perimeter. Who doesn't want that in today's league? So, Richie, do you expect Carlson to come back? And if so, what kind of things are you looking for in terms of what you expect these NBA draft guys to be telling Carlson to improve upon if he does decide to return to Utah?
I would expect him to come back. I've kind of been consistent about this. I don't think he's going to be drafted just because of his age. I think he could definitely carve out a career in the NBA. We see so many guys going through the G League, signing as undrafted free agents and making their way into really solid NBA players. I think Carlson has that upside. The big thing, and he said this himself, is his frame. That's what people are worried about. They want to see if he is able to gain and maintain weight. I think from a skills perspective, he's shown a lot. He's an incredible shot blocker. He is a really good three-point shooter. We've seen him knock down at a high clip this year, and with a lot of confidence. I think that's really intriguing. In an offense that isn't necessarily built for him to be shooting threes all the time, I think that's something that could really be showcased at the next level, at an elite level. But I think just filling in his frame would be big. He's quick on his feet. He's got great vertical athleticism. There's a lot to like in Branden Carlson, just as an athlete, as a player. Obviously, an incredible guy who has been a leader for this team. And that's one of the things he mentioned about why he chose to come back this year. And one of the ways he developed this year was his leadership. And I think you can see it on the court. You could see that guys kind of were responding to him a little differently, that he was the guy leading this team. And I think that's awesome. I think that is something that NBA guys definitely take into consideration. They look at all sorts of personality things and if you're going to be a right fit for their situation. Heck, I think that's the same around all sports. I think that's why we saw Britton Covey make an NFL roster this last year, just because he was an incredible guy with the football stuff. I think, just there's going to be questions about his frame. Ultimately, I think it's probably in Carlson's best interest to come back with the feedback that he gets. He knows he's going to hear about his frame, but I also think there's going to be some talk about like things they want to see from him if he's going to come back the next year. And they're going to want to see certain improvements in his game. I think what comes to my mind is just like, how good of a passer is Carlson going to be? He doesn't need to be an amazing passer. He doesn't need to be Nikola Jokic, but he does have to be serviceable. And he has to be a guy that doesn't get stuck in an NBA system, that doesn't get stuck with the ball because he can't make the pass. And I think we saw a little bit of that throughout this season, especially as teams would double him. I think that's a phase of Carlson's game that he could improve. And then just, I don't know. I think Carlson, like defensively, is about as good of a prospect out there. He's, like I said, he's really good at moving his feet, insane shot blocker. A lot to like with Carlson as far as that translation goes to the NBA. So I don't want to say like he's for sure not going to the league. I can't promise that. I have no idea what scouts are saying. I would, if I had to bet on it, I would say he returns for one more year with the Runnin Utes and makes a shot at an NCAA tournament, gets a little more exposure, works on his game, fills in some of the cracks, and then makes a run at it next year.
Selfishly, I just want him to return to get to the tournament, because the fact that a player of his caliber,
absolutely,
the fact that a player of his caliber has not made it with the Runnin Utes to March Madness, I think is insane. And it's kind of sad because like the improvement that we've seen upon him year upon year has been so amazing to watch. And I agree with you. I think it's his frame that's kind of really holding him back from making that jump. And we've seen it being taken advantage of, I guess, by some teams in the Pac-12. I think another thing that he might have to work on, and I was listening to Don McClain talk about this, Pac-12 analyst who's watched Branden Carlson a lot, but he mentioned that he really wants to see him be able to guard the small guys next year if he does decide to return. That would be able to help show NBA scouts like, hey, I can switch on to, a 1 or a 2 and I'll be just fine. So I think Carlson being able to guard on the perimeter and guard all positions is also what will help him gain, move up in NBA draft stock. But yeah, I agree with you. In my opinion, I think he's coming back. I think it benefits him. It benefits the program. It's a win-win all around. So excited to see maybe what he does learn if he comes back. Maybe he can share what he's going to try and work on. But the fact that he's able to develop an outside shot, and I just think overall his defense, his offense, like he has improved so much since his freshman season. And I'm just excited to see what he can do if he does come back for this 5th year. And I'm just really hoping they make the tournament. That would just make my day as a Runnin Utes fan. I think the bigger news though was the surprise of Lazar Stefanovic leaving and going into the transfer portal. Obviously, he wasn't the number one option on offense, but at times the Utes did rely on his scoring because he was that type of guy that was known to put up shots with comfortability. It just seemed like he was willing to make shots. It seemed at times when we were in, 5-minute scoring droughts, which seemed to be almost every game, Stefanovic was the guy that was trying to replace what we lost with Gabe Madsen for most of the year. Maybe the grass is greener on the other side. He's looking for a program where he wants to be starting because obviously with Madsen in, he comes off the bench. But what was your reaction to Stefanovic going into the transfer portal? And what are your thoughts, I guess, looking in retrospect of what he did for the Runnin Utes program?
I think it's one that kind of hurts the program just because he had a really good season. I think since the day he walked in, he's been one of our top scorers, and having that depth would be awesome next year. That being said, Utah's in a really good spot. They have a lot of open spots. And I don't know. I wish the best for Lazar. Like I said, he had a really good year this year. 10.2 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, 2.7 assists per game. Shot 36% from the field, 36% from three. Played about 28 minutes per game. I know he's received some interest from Minnesota so far, so there is definitely interest out there. Like a lot of teams are gonna be looking at a guy like Lazar and are gonna be wanting that. Heck, I could see even a jump in the Pac-12. I know Arizona lost Kurt Kriza, Washington State lost TJ Bamba. There is a need for those teams to fill in some of their scoring. So if Lazar decides he wants to stay in the Conference of Champions, then there's definitely a route for him there. I'm sure we'll hear more about just his situation, where he ends up going in the coming weeks. Ultimately, I kind of just think, like you said, it's a grass is greener scenario. And he's been here for 2 years. Utah hasn't really sniffed an NCAA tournament. So he's going to be looking for different pastures and hopefully a system where he is able to get to the NCAA tournament. I don't know if that's necessarily his priority or if his priority is more of showcasing his talent. Either way, I think he's going to find the situation that's right for him, and I wish him the best in that. But yeah, like I said, it hurts the program because Lazar has been a staple for the program for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see Craig's comments on that departure because I think if they wanted to make a tournament run, obviously they do. I think he would have been a great piece in that rotation, especially coming off the bench. I feel like his scoring was a great continuation of when we lost, when Madsen was going down. He was able to step up and fill that role, which is needed. Other
Sure.
big news, obviously, was the signing or the commitment of Lawson Lovering from Colorado. Big guy transfer. And I think this transfer answers one of the big questions that this Runnin Utes team needed to have answered, which was size of physicality. And those two, I think size and physicality. I think Oregon is a good example, and it's the worst matchup for Utah every year in basketball, and it's mainly because of those two things. The other guys have bigger size and bigger physicality, and that's what keeps them in games. So the fact that Utah now has 3 guys, 2 of them 7-footers. I think Kate is he a 7-footer? I think, or is he almost 7 feet?
I think he's 6'9", 6'10". So
6'10".
he's close. Yeah.
So, but that's amazing that you now have a ton of height down low, which maybe opens up some possibilities. Maybe Branden moving out to the 4 at times with Lawson at the 5, bringing Kaba in to work with Lawson or Branden, and now having 3 guys with significant height adds to your depth, adds to the meaning of your rotations. I think we're going to see a lot of fun rotations moving forward. I think the big conversation this last season was, are we going to see Keita with Carlson on the same floor at the same time? Now I think this adds even like a deeper conversation of, well, what if you had, Carlson with Lovering, or what if you had Lovering with Keita? Like, I just think he adds exactly what Utah needs down low in the paint. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's a really solid addition. He's played in 34 games for Colorado this year, 7 feet, 200 pounds. His stats aren't great, but there's also something to be desired there. 4.9 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, 1 block per game, shoots 42% from the free throw. I watched his game against Utah Valley in the NIT, and that was probably his best game of the season. He finished with 21.7 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block. And some of the things that stood out to me, he did shoot a little bit from the mid range. He's kind of an interesting and like quirky player. Just like some of his moves aren't necessarily traditional. Like a lot of the times when he would get the ball passed to him in the post, or in the mid range, like right in the key, he would shoot like a little floater, and it looked a little weird, but also he nailed it like 4 or 5 times. I think he's kind of just like a quirky player. Doesn't necessarily have the vertical athleticism that you would want in a 7 foot guy that would be your number one shot blocker. But for that reason, I think he could play next to Carlson, who is more of a shot blocker. He's good at moving his feet. He's pretty quick for his size. I think that's one of the things that definitely stood out for me when I was watching him. And he has pretty decent hands. If he's coming in to be your starting center, I don't think that's necessarily a great thing. However, if he's coming in to be your backup center, then it's a really good signing. He's going to add depth. Like I said, he's played a lot of minutes this year, and I would expect him to improve on some of his averages, and just to be a better player going into the next season. So I think overall it is a really good depth, a good addition if it's from a depth perspective. You hit on it, Thatcher. The rotations of the big men are going to be interesting. I wonder if Keita is the starting power forward next year, or what it's going to look like. Obviously, there needs to be a couple more additions to the transfer portal. I believe Utah still has 4 open spots. So there's going to be a lot to talk. They have offered a lot of guys, but from what I've seen, a lot of the guys that they're offering are kind of more in the like small forward to point guard range. So I wouldn't necessarily expect to see like a power forward come in just from what we know. And I think Keba could be the guy next year filling in that power forward spot, especially if Carlson comes back, because I mean, just that's a nasty front court with the spacing, with Keba's shot blocking as well as Carlson's. That puts you in a really good position defensively, and hopefully Keba's able to kind of iron out some of his flaws that he's had this last season. But yeah, overall, really, really good signing. I'm excited about it. I think it's a really good way to start the transfer portal process.
Yeah, should be interesting to see who the Utes get in terms of that forward and point guard position. Obviously, they want to get some more scoring. I've heard 3 guys, I can't remember all their names, but Kwani from Cal is looking to be a high transfer pick. And then the point guards from Pepperdine and Grand Canyon were also 2 names that were mentioned. I think Mike Mitchell, I can't remember if he's from Pepperdine, but both of those guys have height and they add scoring, obviously, which is what the Runnin Utes need. But it'll be interesting to see how Craig Smith works, because we mentioned a lot during the season, this recruiting cycle was probably what's going to be the thing that's probably sets him apart and gets him to that next level where he's starting to meet and exceed expectations for Runnin Utes fans to get that program back to what it used to be historically.